Before I get into today's video on finally playing an absolute classic, I just wanted to say a very quick thank you. Today we hit 500 subscribers and that is insane to me. I mean, just imagine 500 people in the same room. That's a lot of people. I just wanted to say thank you. If you take the time out of your day to watch my videos, subscribe and comment and all that sort of stuff, it really does mean a lot, and I hope you enjoy today's video. I'll be honest, Resident Evil is one of those games I know I should have played sooner. I mean, the remake for the GameCube released almost 18 years ago, and the HD remaster was 5 years ago. I honestly don't have any excuse for why it took me so long to get around to playing through a game that is so iconic. I've never heard a bad thing about it. Now, before I talk about how my first time playing Resident Evil went, I think it's best to know what games I have played in this series. It shouldn't take long. Okay, I've played Resident Evil 2 through the remake, Resident Evil 5 and Resident Evil 7. And that's it. Okay, now that your respect for me is at an all-time low, I'm sure you want to hear my opinions about a game that started a whole genre. Welcome to So I Finally Played Resident Evil. I feel I need to get this out of the way immediately. The tank controls aren't bad at all. Most of you are nodding your head skeptically because you already know this and feel like I'm about to drop a big but. I'm not. I'm just bringing this up straight away because it has always been an aspect of the early games in this series that had made me hesitant to give them a crack. It was just a feature I wasn't sure how I'd personally enjoy, so much so that with Capcom remaking 2 and now 3, I was wondering if they'd go back and remake 1 again with this new style. Yeah, the tank controls seriously worried me, but they work great. Now obviously they took me a little bit to get used to, and I had my frustrating moments with the sudden camera angle changes, forcing me into the arms of a zombie. But the controls quickly became second nature because of how familiar you will become with your surroundings. The mansion in Resident Evil is iconic, and whilst we visit other areas throughout our journey, the mansion is where you'll be spending, I'd say, roughly 50% of the game in. Personally, backtracking in games is not a favourite gameplay mechanic of mine, usually. But what the backtracking does here in Resident Evil is make every part of the mansion constantly tense, whether you've already been there or not. And that brings me to the biggest aspect of Resident Evil, the survival horror. The amount of variety Resident Evil uses to put you on edge is far more than I ever expected. The combination of limited ammunition and resources, the amount of variety in the zombies and monsters.
Zombies and monsters.
The game's lack of sound enhancing your ability to hear distant groans and growls. Exploring the mansion, graveyard, residence and labs, finding objects to help you further explore, but simultaneously knowing you have to go back to an area you'd hope not to return to. All of these moments create true horror, but are enhanced when we start talking about the game's choice of camera angles. Hearing a noise in the distance has that added bit of terror when you have a set camera angle. And if you want it to change, you're going to have to get closer to whatever made that noise or try and wait it out long enough to get it in view. But is that too late? Again, the set camera angles were an aspect I wasn't 100% on before playing the game. But now that I've experienced them, I just don't see how the game could create the same horror without them. The gameplay itself is another source of tension because other than aiming up and down, you just shoot what's in front of you. You could get a lucky headshot, maybe you get a 2-for-1 kill, but maybe you won't. The dogs in particular were a massive source of stress for myself because I had so many times where the dogs would almost get me, but my shotgun would cock just in time, but leave my heart racing. You can't kill every enemy you see, or you'll be struggling later for resources, and if you do kill a zombie without a headshot or burning them, then you get crimson heads, and it's just a nightmare on top of a nightmare. What I didn't expect to get me the most anxious and on edge though was the fear of dying due to the limited resources that enable you to save the game. The underground lab in particular with the sharks was terrifying. One, because I think it's a natural instinct to want to get out of the water. And two, this big dead shark in the water made me incredibly nervous. But three, I hadn't saved in a hot second, and death would mean I needed to replay through a good chunk of the game. The save system creates a lot of these moments of, oh, I might be in trouble here, and it has real consequences. It's not a frustrating punishment and can be useful to know what items to grab for next time, but encountering the many enemies, knowing any of them could easily remove your hard-earned progress is enough to get me on edge. The story of Resident Evil is presented very silly, in my opinion, but the lore you find whilst exploring really hooked me in and got me interested in all the viruses, victims of the mansion and their stories, potential threats to look out for, or goodies that someone may have hidden. Basically, I have nothing bad to say about Resident Evil, and that sort of baffles me. Could I make fun of the silly voice acting?
No.
Yes, but it's sort of been done to death, and it sort of acts as a way to break the tension almost. Can the controls suddenly change when walking in a direction and have a camera angle change so you keep going back and forth for no reason? Yeah, but it doesn't happen enough to be any more than a slight inconvenience. Is it a bit of an inconvenience to go back and forth between your item box so much because you don't have enough space for an important item? Yes. But none of these are enough of a pain for me to say anything but good things about my experience with Resident Evil. Whether it's the game's thick atmosphere, the game's lore, the gameplay loop, and discovering more and more about this infection and how we can escape, the story's twists and turns, it just hooked me in, and if like myself you haven't played through Resident Evil yet, I strongly recommend you give it a go. I mean, I started my second playthrough. I can't get enough. So much so that by the end of this year, I hope to have played through the rest of the mainline series as well. The game holds up incredibly well almost 18 years later, and if you want to play through a true icon in gaming, you can't go wrong with the Resident Evil.